take your seats, please.
एकछिन है त्यो तपाईहरु म्यानेज गर्नुहुन्छ नि
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. I'm Sujeev Shakya, and on behalf of the organizers, the French Republic, the Embassy of France, Julliand Française, and Nepal Economic Forum, I'm very happy to welcome you all to this night of ideas. Before we begin the panel discussion, may I request the Ambassador of France to Nepal, His Excellency Yves Carmona, to make his opening remarks.
Namaste. Can you hear me? Yes. Dear Mr. Chief Secretary, Dr. Subedi, dear Secretary to Ministry of Commerce, Mr. Narendra Lapatupadhyay, Excellencies, senior officials of the Government of Nepal, friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure and an honor to welcome you to this night of ideas, where will be discussed economic development and landlocked countries. First, a night of ideas, what is that? And why is it organized? The Night of Ideas has been organized for the first time in 2016 by the Institut Français, in charge of promoting French culture all over the world. French culture is about partnership. It's about promotion of values. It's about open debate. Tonight's debate exemplifies these principles, since it is a partnership between Institut Français, Nepal Economic Forum, Alliance Française de Katmandou, and the French Embassy. It illustrates values, cosmopolitanism, linguistic diversity, freedom. Cosmopolitanism on stage, we have two French people, two Nepali, one Indian, chosen for their expertise on the issue. Linguistic diversity, the debate will take place in English in order to allow a wide participation, including with the floor. And freedom of expression, I'm proud to say that that's one of so many common points we have between Nepal and France. I'm very proud of having convinced all partners to put for the first time Nepal on the global map of the Night of Ideas for its second edition. The debate is podcasted and watched through internet and through YouTube all over the world. Nepal speaks before Europe and America. Let's congratulate. Tonight's theme is economic development and landlocked countries. I propose that theme, and it has been easily endorsed by all the stakeholders. May I be a bit personal here? During my 40-plus years career overseas, I served in 6 countries, including 3 landlocked, least developed countries, Rwanda, Laos PDR, and now Nepal. Being landlocked is definitely a hurdle these countries have in common on their road to development. But being landlocked is not only a handicap, since it allowed these countries to preserve their integrity and identity against various processes of invasion or acculturation. And some landlocked countries do very well. Think of Switzerland, or Austria, or Luxembourg, among others. But today's challenge is to transform being landlocked in added value in a world increasingly shaped by trade, globalization, and interaction. It's not a given. Mr. Sudhir Shakya, whom I thank for our exciting exchanges of ideas, entitled Isolation, 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 the first chapter of his excellent book, Unleashing Nepal. Isolation is certainly linked to geography, but isn't it mainly a political issue? Think of Japan. It's an archipelago with historical significant naval capacity, but it willingly isolated itself from the rest of the world during 2.5 centuries. And that was a political decision. On the other way around, landlocked Luxembourg has been one of the 6 founders of the European market and then European Union, and no one would think of it being isolated. So being landlocked is not a curse, it's not doomed. And I believe tonight's debate will carry enlightened analysis and potential solutions for Nepal to overcome being landlocked and find its own path to development. I'm confident we will have a fruitful discussion with 5 outstanding experts, 4 panelists, Dr. Swarnim Waglé, Honourable Member of the National Planning Commission, after many assignments in and out of public service, Madame Valérie Julliand, who is a resident coordinator of the United Nations in Nepal after serving in many other developing countries, Dr. Anasua Chaudhury, who is a fellow of the Observer Research Foundation based in Kolkata, and my old friend Pierre Jacquet, president of the Global Development Network based in New Delhi. And last but not least, the moderator will be dear Sudhir Shakya, who everyone here knows, a brilliant thinker, as well as a practitioner with a deep knowledge of development in a wide array of countries. He has actively prepared this debate with us, and I'm sure he will perfectly moderate it with all his smiling authority. I leave him the floor, and thank you for your attention, and keep the discussion flowing. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for a wonderful remark and setting the stage today. So the way we are going to structure tonight's debate or discussion is going to be that we are going to have the panelists take on a few opening remarks for about 5 minutes each, and there will be one more round of interventions from the panels, and then we will go to the floor, take some questions, and come back, and then we'll have closing remarks from the panelists, and we should be able to move out of this hall by about 6:15. So that's the sort of, I'm more of a timekeeper here because and it's a great honor and privilege to moderate this panel, which comes with a wealth of experience. Since the ambassador has introduced the panelists, I would like to deep dive into issues. And when we talk about landlocked countries, as a Himalayan citizen, all the Himalayan states and countries are landlocked. And this always used to intrigue me, be it Tibet, Ladakh, Nepal, Sikkim, or Bhutan. And this is always looked at, what does it do to development, what does it do to economy? And as we try to move on to working in other countries, another landlocked country, we've been working for now 6 years in Rwanda, Bhutan, another 5 to 6 years we've been working there. And then we tend to find a pattern around landlocked countries. And the other discourse we've been working on is on the fragile to frontier. So how do fragile countries become frontier investment destinations? And in the fragile countries, a lot of landlocked countries are seen to be very fragile in their economy. So this has always intrigued me. And as we look at globalization discourse being rewritten and rediscussed now, and I remember last week a friend of ours, a very popular guy, Anil Chitrakar, had posted a ship of the Ming Dynasty of a 1433 ship that basically was the last ship that sailed out of China. And then from then onwards, China started dealing internally. So I mean, these are different times of the times, different things happen in different parts of the world. And also there is a lot of good examples happening now. We have BBIN, where Anasua is the Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal initiative. There's BIMSTEC. There's, in Africa, we've seen how the East Af EAC has been working. EU is a big example. And that has also changed a lot. And to setting the stage, so yes, last night we were having some very interesting discussion with the panelists over dinner, was that, is being landlocked an impediment to economic growth? Is that so? Or being landlocked just creates yet another excuse for not getting things right? You know, is that the case? Oh, we are landlocked, we can't get things done. And have we, and especially in Nepal, confused our difficult terrain, the mountainous terrain, with being landlocked? You know, is this because of terrain or because of landlocked, there's no, you know, development is a challenge? And are there some global examples to follow? Because we've seen that being landlocked, being poor, if you have development in your head right, and you know, Rwanda has done wonderful stuff, and it's, you know, that's where the conversation between Ambassador Carmona and I started, with, you know, his experience of Rwanda 40 years ago, where they had to queue for gasoline, and, you know, and what is now Rwanda today. So that's where all this, you know, the conspiracy on this discussion began. And so there are a lot of issues, so maybe I'll straight move on to the panelists. And first of all, we have, will be 5 minutes. So Swarnim, and he has worked, as Ambassador mentioned, in multiple countries, and now he's taking on the challenge to fix Nepal's economic problems. And you know, and I admire his tenacity. You know, I mean, you know, we have interesting conversations, but he's there and making impact. And so Swarnim, just to set the stage, you know, as a Nepal, as a landlocked country, you've seen many other countries, what's happening, and, you know, there are development challenges, but there's a move towards economic growth. You know, I mean, as a blog we came out yesterday, you know, sort of cautious optimism, you know. So maybe we can start with you, 5 minutes, your opening remarks.
Thank you, Sujeev, and thank you, Your Excellency, the French Ambassador, for putting together this very relevant program, and thank you, audience, for a great turnout. I'm honored to be on this panel with distinguished colleagues. Let me start with the big picture with 3 facts that sort of, I think, captures the basic problem with landlockedness. Of the 40 or so countries that are landlocked, which have a population of more than 250,000, so 250,000. So I'm ignoring the Liechtensteins and the Andorras, you know, sort of 250,000 people or more, so there are 40 of these. Of them, only 6 are sort of rich, really rich. So you have the Switzerland, Austria, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, sort of $10,000 per capita and above. Then you have another 14 countries which are either endowed with natural resources, so oil and minerals, or diamonds in the case of Botswana, quite famously, or they happen to be located nearby neighbors who are relatively well off, but they themselves lag behind. Then you have the remaining 20 or so, which are absolutely rock bottom in terms of the income ladder. They're at the bottom quartile of global income per capita. So mostly in sub-Saharan Africa and countries like Nepal and Afghanistan here. Even Laos, which is climbing up fast. So that's one fact, one scenario. The second is, so 10% of the world population live in landlocked countries, but 80% of that subset is actually quite poor. And the third fact I want to share with you is, if you send a ship, you know, full of containers from Baltimore in eastern United States to Ivory Coast, the figure is a bit dated, but you can just scale it up. It costs about $3,000 to send that container from all the way from the United States to Ivory Coast in Africa. But it costs $13,000 for the same container to go from Ivory Coast to Central African Republic. And you have a similar parallel for a ship that leaves Rotterdam in Europe to, let's say, that goes to Tanzania, which costs $3,000 to $4,000. And for that same container to move you know, inland to Uganda or Rwanda is way more expensive. So this sort of hints at something, 2 things. The first fact hints that if you happen to be located very close, or you're virtually inside the world's richest or the world's largest common market, then landlockedness is not so much an issue. You know, If you're Austria next to the European Union, not so much of a hurdle. If you're Switzerland, it's actually not even technically landlocked, as people know that if you go to Basel, you see these ships coming on the Rhine, which are actually, this is a navigable river, and you can actually put things on that ship which can, be offloaded in New York. So it supports the entire North Atlantic trade. So the point is, and the third example says, well, it's really costly trade, costly distance to world markets that really negates or penalizes countries. So the basic channels, these two channels, the economic channel and the geostrategic or geopolitical channel, maybe I'll come to that later. But the economic channels of why landlocked countries, everything else held constant, are lag behind coastal economies has been well known since the time of Adam Smith, and even earlier, but Adam Smith really wrote it down in The Wealth of Nations, 1776, but the first few editions came out in 1775. The reason I emphasize the dates is very important. So Adam Smith was born in 1723, the same year as Prithvinaran Shah. So he was born in the mountains of Scotland. Prithvinaran Shah was born in the mountains of Gorkha. Prithvinaran Shah died in 1775 when the Wealth of Nations came, right? So he died in January 1775. Wealth of Nations came in the sort of later part of the year. The publication in a full-fledged manner happened in 76. So I say Prithvinaran Shah died a year earlier. He never read Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. Had he read it, he would have extended Nepal's unification drive all the way to West Bengal. He wouldn't have stopped until he reached the seas. So I joke about it a few times, quite frequently, but there's a fundamental point there that landlocked countries, because of the costly distance from world markets, are lag behind in terms of technology diffusion. And there's also something more fundamental, and I'll end with this note. Economists have known for decades now that wealth creation happens because of a sustained rise in productivity gains, reflecting specialization. And specialization is a function of division of labor. And this, I borrow from Adam Smith again, division of labor is limited by the extent of the market. So this is where the economic channels conspire against landlocked countries. But I will, of course, in the second round, I'll come and argue that landlockedness is not a destiny. The 20th century model of production and exchange that sort of penalized many of these countries in sub-Saharan Africa and Nepal and countries like us, that with a clever reorientation of our economic strategies and a smart acknowledgement of things happening around us, India, China, rest of Asia, I think we can work out a smarter strategy to convert our handicap into actually a blessing. So I will end on a very optimistic note, but I begin with this stylized fact that landlocked countries have had a hard deal in the last 200 years.
Yeah, thank you, Soren. That's amazing contextualization. So I'd move now to Valérie, and we, as I said, Swarnim was going to take on the destiny issue in the second round. But when we talk about landlocked countries, we also talk about our rights on for transit. This becomes as the Almaty Declaration, the UN conventions, and so how do you see this? Having worked in multiple countries now, pretty much settling down in Nepal, how do you see the landlocked countries, and how what are the challenges to growth? Are there challenges to growth? Continuing our conversation yesterday, maybe your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Sujeev, and first of all, thank you very much, Ambassador, and the Alliance Française for organizing this event. Very happy to be here with you and with the panelists and with all of you. I don't consider myself as a specialist of landlocked country, because unlike the Ambassador, I worked all my life in countries that had very nice access to sea. And actually, I have to say, as I was telling the panelists yesterday night, that actually, having been in that situation, close to the sea very often, I feared being in a landlocked country. And when at one stage before Nepal, I was given the opportunity to work in a landlocked country in Africa, I really thought twice, and I said, that would be terrible, to have no access to the sea. For some reasons that are not linked to this, I didn't go to that country. But now that I'm in Nepal, actually, I'm very pleased to be here. I think Swarnim has explained very much some aspect of the landlockedness. and the fact that it presents a number of handicaps for countries that are in that situation. But if you look at another country that is not landlocked, it will have other problems. So from a United Nations perspective, what we consider is that each country has its set of problems and limitations. Not all countries have the same sets of problems, but they all have some problems. So the objective of the United Nations is somewhat to allow the world to function in a way where disadvantages are compensated by mechanisms of laws and conventions. And actually, when it comes to landlocked country, the UN has also seized the matter and has also made some progress on that. Maybe it came late, maybe to the taste of some of these countries, because it's only in 2001 that the United Nations appointed a special representative for this issue. And there was actually a conference on that occasion that took place in 2001 that allowed for the countries of the world to think about what are the challenges of the landlocked countries, and especially the landlocked developing countries. Because at the same time, I don't think that it's really worth the time of the United Nations to start thinking about the fate of Switzerland and Hungary and as landlocked per se. So that's why for the UN, actually, we don't consider all the countries that are landlocked, which are countries and territories, about 48, but there are for us 31 landlocked developing countries. Not all at the same level, but 31 that indeed deserve and should be part of all the conventions that we have elaborated. And as Swarnim was saying, out of them you have 18 that their GDP per capita is less than $1,000. And Nepal is in this category, of course. So for the United Nations, it was very important that when we look at the problems, what are the main problems? It's the remoteness from sea. So it means that whatever you have to bring or whatever you have to send costs you more money. So that's one impact. The second one is that since you are surrounded by these neighbors, and actually, mind you, there are some landlocked countries that have only one single neighbor, the case of Lesotho, for instance, or Swaziland, but you are dependent on the stability of that transit country. Let's say for the countries that are not landlocked, we'll call them the transit countries for the landlocked countries, and you are very dependent on that, because if something happened in this country, so it means that you, landlocked, you have no possibility to do something else. And what is the main problem of the landlocked country is that somewhat these problems create a vicious circle. Because having no access to sea obliges you, therefore, to go with long transport back and forth, which means that you have a high cost in most of the things that you buy or you sell, which means that it lowers, it slows the growth of the countries. And if the economy is slow, as a consequence, very often, the social development is as well. Not always, because we can have a whole debate on that, whether social or economy comes first, but that's another debate. But there is a lot of vicious circle. So what the convention is aiming at is actually as rectifying this inequality. Because what we want at the end of the day is for all countries in the world to be on an equal footing when it comes to working together. And that's the logic of having one country, one vote in the United Nations. Bigger country don't have more vote than smaller country. So this is what we aimed at with this convention and with the different instruments, to have some agreement on the cost, on the trade facilities, on making sure that you will not prevent movement. All this is very important. But once again, and as Swarnim said, I mean, it's not necessarily a curse to be landlocked. And actually, I found an interesting quote of Paul Collier, who is a British economist. I don't know, maybe you know that. And he said, if you are landlocked, you serve the world. If you are coastal, you serve the world. And if you are landlocked, you serve your neighbors. So I would say maybe my first conclusion is have good relations with your neighbors, with your landlocked, because there is no other way, otherwise you can survive, and then we'll talk more later.
Thank you, Valérie. I think it's a great, we're moving from the Google Street View of what Swarnim was presenting, and we are oscillating between the street view and the 30,000 feet view, and we'll go and we have now Anasua, a good neighbor here, and we got in Anasua because She's been doing some great work around connectivity in the BBIN region, and we had the opportunity of interacting also in different occasions before this. And also from, when I look at South Asia and the discourse around East South Asia also, that it's not only it's about nations, because even in India you have states that are landlocked, states that don't have access to the sea, and they go through different economic challenges, which we've seen with the northeastern states, some of the Himalayan states. So you've been also of late traveling extensively around borders, and the researches you're doing. What are some of the thoughts, initial thoughts that are coming in, as we were discussing yesterday, maybe with you also continuing the discourse, 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Before I start, at the very outset, I must thank His Excellency French Ambassador to Nepal, and also to my friends Sujeev and Veronique for inviting me here and to give me opportunity to share some of my ideas on borders and borderlands, I think which will be very relevant in this discourse or discussion in front of this August gathering. Well, whenever we are talking in terms of neighbors, I think it's good to look at South Asian neighbors first. And we know that nowadays the term connectivity has become almost a buzzword in our interdependent world. And our moderator and Sujeev has suggested me to confine within connectivity projects. So I would like to share some of my thoughts, on these connectivity projects and its pros and cons. We know that to strengthen connectivity, it is also important to have concentrated efforts to develop both hard and soft infrastructure. And it is comprising infrastructural development like transport, energy, telecommunication services, but at the same time it should have a kind of institutional linkages to strengthen institutional understandings across border as well. While we are looking towards connectivity, I think it is important to take into account recent developments so far as the connectivity within South Asia is concerned. And it is, of course, in relation to the development of BBIN to emerge as a sub-region. All we know that this kind of initiative is not the new one or the first one in this part of South Asia, because ADB also took up initiative much time back in 1990s to form SAGQ, but unfortunately it didn't take place. But nowadays we are seeing that BBIN, it is moving, it is progressing, though slowly, but in a positive way. Why? Because a kind of political congenial atmosphere is there. And why I intend to concentrate on BBIN connectivity projects? Because one of the major objectives of BBIN is to transform landlocked areas into land-linked areas. And while we were discussing yesterday evening about this landlockedness and landlinkedness, I found it's very interesting, and I think it would not be irrelevant to put forward this question whether this kind of landlockedness is related to a kind of perception. Having heard of His Excellency Mr. Ambassador's experiences in Rwanda, as well as my friends' experiences in Rwanda, which is also a landlocked country, but actually they are in a position to negotiate their existence as landlocked for the betterment of their own interest. So if we think this landlockedness is related, hypothetically related to perception, which means it is related to a kind of mindset. But, you know, while I've been extensively traveling throughout all bordering points, you know, in Nepal, India border, as well as Bhutan, India border, this question actually comes up in my mind. Is this mindset is confined within a specific geographical region, or this kind of landlockedness is equally important for the bordering areas who actually share the open border with India? You know, we know that 1,751 kilometer long border Nepal is sharing with India, and the total stretch of border, it comes around 699 kilometer for Bhutan and India. So I wanted to ask you to think about perception, because we know that perception is not a kind of homogeneous entity. It has a kind of multi-layered notions. So is it the same perception of landlockedness in the peripheral area as well? This is point number 2, what I wanted to raise. And also, in terms of connectivity, we all know that, you know, landlocked countries, that the notion of landlocked countries is also related to get an access to third country destination. In specific field, I think BBIN is creating a kind of space where we know that very recently India has given a kind of transit to have a trade between Nepal and Bangladesh. But we have visited, you know, that bottleneck as well, which is called the stretch between Kakarbita and Bangla Bandha. But the stretch is not in a proper shape, so which needs immediate attention and immediate action for development. Now, lastly, I would say that if we put this whole gamut of connectivity and you know, and the initiatives that are taken in South Asia, if you put it in a much bigger field, then we will see that these initiatives are not standalone things, because, you know, again, ADB has taken a kind of initiative to transform certain, you know, trade, certain transport corridors to economic corridors. And they have already highlighted some transport corridors, say for example, northeastern corridors, eastern corridors. And if we see first 3 corridors, then we can identify Patna or Bihar as one of the nodal, you know, area. If it is so, and if we can develop our periphery as a kind of borderland across border, and if we can develop proper understanding, mutual understanding across border, then we can have a kind of, you know, we can imagine to have economic hub in bordering area, and then the whole, you know, that picture of connectivity, we can put it in a much more broader perspective. So I'll
Thank you, Anasua. I think it's a great stuff for us to ponder upon, the perception of landlocked countries. I think we talked about the real landlocked countries, and Valérie brought in about the conventions, the UN conventions for landlocked countries, and now we are talking about perceptions, and I would like you to talk a bit about the borders in the next round. So I'd move on to Pierre, sitting in Delhi and having, you know, looking at heading a global organization, a development organization, you know, I mean, looking at development, observing development throughout the world, you know, your career as teaching, lecturing, and how have you been seeing this? You know, I mean, specifically on landlocked countries and the interfaces. You know, I mean, just again with you continuing our conversations yesterday.
Thank you very much, and let me also first thank His Excellency the Ambassador, my old friend, my friend for a long time, Yves Carmona, and the Nepal Economic Forum and the Institut Français and all the organizers for this opportunity to be here in Nepal and take part in this panel discussion. Now, there is one advantage of being the last to speak. It is that everything has been said, so you just can pick a few things and repeat them in a different way, and that's an easier task than introducing the debate. And there is, of course, one big problem with being the last to speak, which is that everything has been said. And I'm exactly in that situation. So I'm not landlocked, but I'm a bit locked. So let me start. And actually, Swarnim almost stole what I wanted to say in the beginning, which was exactly to go back to Adam Smith. So thanks for mentioning him, but it doesn't make my life easier. But we have facts. And as Yves said earlier, we like debate, but we have to base the debate on facts, and there is no room for alternate facts here. And the facts are known, and Swarnim mentioned them. When you look at all landlocked countries today, the concentration of, and especially the 31 developing countries, none of them is in a high bracket of human development indicator. None of them is in a high bracket of income. So there is a correlation between being landlocked and becoming to the bottom of the list of income rank list and human development indicator rank list of developing countries. So that's a fact to deal with. It doesn't mean that it's a fatality, but it's a fact that that actually justifies this discussion. The next remark is that this fact is not new. It has been known for a long time, and there has been many papers on that. Each new paper brings some new. Basically, the discussion remains a bit the same. So that's sobering, because it means that we have a problem that we know. We know where the problems lie. We even know the kind of quote-unquote solutions which might improve the situations. But still we are discussing the same factors, which means that somehow implementation has not been there. We have failed maybe discussing the how instead of discussing the what. And if you go around the world and take part in seminars about landlocked countries, you will hear a lot about what these countries should do, but very little about how they might do it. And that may be an issue that in this country it might be interesting to tackle, because there are answers to that as well. My second brief general statement before saying a few things a bit more precise is that this cannot be only a question of geography. When you look around the world, there are many, many, many landlocked regions. In any existing country, you have landlocked regions. And the fact of being part of a wider political and administrative entity has allowed this region to surmount the problems linked with landlockedness. So that's vital to understand, because it means that we cannot restrict the discussion to technical aspects. Politics matters fundamentally there. And politics amounts indeed to have good relations with the rest of the world, and certainly good relations with your neighbors. And that may be a constraint, but if you can achieve that, it's also a big element of the quote-unquote again solution. Let me move to the costs of landlockedness. We know them. They are linked to transport costs. And when we say transport costs, they have many dimensions. One is distance, obviously. The second one is the quality of infrastructure. But it's not these are not the only dimensions. A third dimension is administrative hurdles all along the way. They can be due to frontiers, but not always frontiers. You can have a lot of regulations that come in. And the fourth series of transport costs are linked to stability and security, not only in the partner countries, but in the country itself, including, of course, the partner countries. What is interesting about these costs is that they are not a characteristic only of landlocked countries. When you look again at the whole world, these problems are everywhere. Transport costs are discussed everywhere, but there is a difference between developed and developing countries, which is that transport costs in developing countries are 170% higher. And these are based on estimates of recent papers by some IMF economists. And when you look at landlocked countries, they are still higher than that. But it's a change of degree, not a change of nature. So basically, the problems that landlocked countries have to face are very similar to the problems that other developing countries have to face. Simply, they have of an order of magnitude bigger, which can be an advantage because it creates very strong incentives to address them. So it's not a difference of nature, it's a difference of size of the problem, let's put it that way. So what to do, and I will end with a few remarks on that. Well, certainly access to market and connectivity are the big words to put in any solutions. That should be based on better infrastructure. So investment in infrastructure should be a priority, and that's certainly something that donor institutions should have in their mind when they want to help an landlocked country. It's some of the priorities. But I would argue that the kind of products that you specialize in is also part of connectivity. Some products connect better than others. For some products, the relative cost of transport over the value added are smaller than others. These are exactly the products on which landlocked countries should specialize. And maybe there is a big change nowadays. That's the development of the technologies of information and communication, because they naturally cut the transport costs for a whole number of products and services. And that might be a very good chance for landlocked countries to actually surmount in a very big way the cost of landlockedness. So there are things that can be done. They can be thought of, and in that sense I join all my friends here to argue that there is no determinism in being landlocked, no fatality. It's a reality. Nothing, there's no need to fight that reality. It's real. No alternate facts again. So let's start from that. And there are many, many things to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's been a sort of a cohesion on the first round that is coming in. Some of the core thought processes on perception, and there are problems. Developing countries anyways have problems. Of course, landlocked countries have a bit more, and this. So I think I would like to go back to what Swarnim wanted to talk about on the issue of destiny. So maybe, quick remarks, and maybe now we'll just get only 2 or 3 minutes on, just we'll have a few interventions and move around. So some of the pet things that are one round on the column, the panelists who not being able to share in the earlier round.
Thank you. There was a famous working paper that came out of the World Bank a few years ago that said landlocked or policy locked. I think that's the crux of this issue. And the quote finding of that paper was it looked at regulations governing foreign direct investment in tradable services, so aviation services, telecom services, ICT services, logistics services. And what it found was that landlocked countries, on average, especially in the developing world, had the most restrictive rules and regulations governing this kind of trade. Precisely the kind of sectors that would have negated the traditional disadvantage of landlockedness, which is basically to do with shipping dependent, transport of heavy bulky goods, right? So with ICT, with a world-class connectivity, we can export ICT services, apps, and medical services, architecture services. There's a whole list sitting in Katmandou, right, or sitting in one of the mountains. Same thing with aviation and telecom and related. So this is really, and why did we end up with that kind of restrictive regimes? And this has a more political economic answer. It's concerned with the large utilities. These are easier instruments for politicians to extract rent from and things like that. So it's tied with more deeper issues of governance. But the point is, if we can reorient our policies and strategic direction in terms of what kind of sectors do we prioritize as a landlocked country, then I think the determinism or the landlockedness as destiny sort of dissipates, it fades away, right? So in Nepal's case, it's definitely modern tradable services, sectors like tourism, and even if it's manufacturing, it's high value, low volume kind of products, which can be carried and transported efficiently if we have a world-class or at least a much more competitive aviation industry here, right? So, you know, there was this figure that I got recently that almost 70 planes come to Nepal, land in Nepal every day in Tribhuvan airport. All of them carry people. Many of them go back, you know, empty in terms of the what do you call it, the spanner of those, the bellies of the airplanes go back empty. If we can fill them with high value, low volume kind of products, we don't need to rely on Calcutta and the poor infrastructure between Birganj and Calcutta. So this is the second point, which is connectivity that you mentioned. Paul Collier documents a lot of these empirical studies. You know, the reason landlocked countries suffer is because there's lack of coordination with the neighboring countries on the kind of infrastructure that you put in. So it's not up to, we can have a beautiful, as Donald Trump says, you know, beautiful expressway from Kathmandu to, just like his beautiful wall that's coming up now, beautiful expressway from Kathmandu to Birganj, but if the connectivity from Birganj to Kolkata is terrible, then our competitiveness and productivity suffers, right? So connectivity is an extremely important issue, and this is where good neighborly relationships is extremely important. So, and the idea of regional public goods, where we have shared infrastructure, not just highways and airports and shared electricity grids in the region, is really important for landlocked countries. And I think you mentioned this very important point that even India has a problem of landlockedness, you know. Northeast India, you look at Pakistan, the northwest Pakistani frontier, Afghanistan. These are as poor as, you know, a sovereign landlocked country. So this is a very important issue. So one is the policy direction. The other one is the neighborhood spillover. This is a well-documented thing in the literature. So, for example, you know, like Valérie mentioned, 1% growth in a neighboring country is associated with 0.4% on average globally. In a contiguous country. But for landlocked countries, that corresponding share is 0.7%. Our destiny is really, our fate or economic fortunes are really tightly interwoven with that of a larger neighboring country. Now, and there's another number as well, which I want to just give to the audience, which is, you know, if you look at the whole cross-country sample of infrastructure quality, this is a paper by Anthony Venables. If you just improve the quality of the infrastructure from the 25th percentile, which is low, to 75th percentile in this global sample, you can do away with half of the traditional handicap associated with land. So this connectivity and physical sort of investment in physical infrastructure really is important to get around this question of, you know, are we doomed to, you know, doomed as a landlocked country. Just one or two more points on effective diplomacy matters to have a friendly neighbor. Collier chapter is titled actually, it's not just landlocked that penalizes you, but being landlocked with bad neighbors is what penalizes you. In our case, you know, I don't want to say India and China are bad neighbors, but they are definitely complicated neighbors that we have to learn to manage that relationship in a smart way. So that's effective diplomacy. And recourse to international instruments and international treaties, GATT Article 5 and all the other UN instruments that we should be well versed in, at least, you know, as the last recourse. Again, the geopolitical dimensions loom large. If you are a Mongolia, you know, you can sue China in the WTO, but you better be aware of the consequences that are likely to hamper. Same with Nepal and India. So these issues are important. That's why smart sort of diplomacy is key there before, you know, taking recourse to international instruments. Okay, I'll stop.
Okay, thanks, Swarnim. I think a very interesting issue on the policy locked, and I would like to move to Anasua on this, because I think as we are discussing, and one of the things I also see is that the way Delhi looks at issues, or the way Kathmandu looks at issues, or Thimphu looks at issues, is different than what happens in, like last week I was in Ruparia, you know, we are looking at Nepal going to Ruparia. I mean, where is the border? I keep on not looking at where's the border. Same thing when you look at Finsokuli in Jaigaon, if you look at it, it's passing through Kakarita, Panitanki. So where is the border? Is this the whole landlockedness is the, you know, sort of, it gets more gravitated thinking in the capital cities, and as we go on, you don't see the borders, and it's a different relationship. So, and how do you see this changing with this BBIN issue, sort of the connectivity coming up? Is that the policy locked? Is that is going to open? And I mean, also adding on to what, you know, Swarnim is giving the indication. And before I forget, I mean, last week there was a very interesting Nepal Aviation Insurance Summit. It's an international summit, and I was moderating a panel there, and exactly the issue on empty, you know, sort of space in the aircraft was discussed, and how can we find high value, as Pierre was mentioned, high value, you know, sort of low volume for stuff to be, you know, exported. Yeah, Anasua.
Yeah, Sujeev, you know, I take this opportunity to share some of my experiences while traveling through bordering areas. You know, precisely I wanted to understand, you know, the perception of landlockedness, whether it is prevalent as strong as in Katmandou in the bordering areas. You know, when I was in Birganj or Kakorbita, I spoke to local people as well as some security officials and government officials. Local people's perception is, you know, they are much more eager to have normal regularization of open border. Because they are, say for example, the shopkeepers, they are totally against of, you know, closing the border, though we are enjoying open border, but again there is you know, questionable notion of openness, because the border opens from 6, some bordering points from 8 to 6, in some area from 6 to 8. So after 8 or after 6, some kind of informal trading arrangement, you know, taking place. So the local people are really very much worried about that. And along with these, I think increasing incidents of trafficking, increasing incidents of not only human trafficking, but you know, drugs, narcotics, arms. So these are few issues and realities at borderlands or bordering areas, which is, these realities are really not, you know, in relations with that kind of notion of landlockedness. So I wanted to understand why this perception is so different. Is it because the border is, you know, they have to negotiate with border day in, day out in their physicality? Is it so? So I'm still, you know, searching for a good, suitable answer. And second, in relation, 1 minute, in relation to my co-panelist, he has actually raised very interesting term, effective diplomacy. And I can't resist myself, you know, to highlight a clear case of effective diplomacy between one of the northeastern states like Tripura and Bangladesh, which is a clear positive example of overcoming landlockedness. You know, we know that out of all 7, 8 sisters, we have Tripura. And now we have made certain kind of arrangements so that we can send rice from Andhra, from the eastern coast, to Tripura, the capital of, I mean to say Agartala, the capital of Tripura, via Bangladesh by using Ashuganj port, which is a riverine port. And Ashuganj port is just 10-12 kilometers away from the border. This is not the only example. I can highlight another example for the development of Palatana power project. Probably some of you know that Palatana is coming up in Tripura again. And for the transshipment of all equipments from the western coast, we have used again Ashuganj port. And in that case, I think Bangladesh ruling party has created a kind of remarkable history instead of stiff resistance coming from you know, the opposition, but she had made it. So this is the clear example of effective diplomacy. I'll stop here.
No, thank you. Thank you. I think very interesting issue raised on the borders, and in terms of what we also saw in East Africa, I mean, one of the things in border is that people start rent-seeking on the border, and people don't want the border to be open 24 hours, and that's a big thing, I mean, because, as Guru Charan Das writes in India Grows at Night, I mean, everything happens when the border is closed. And one of the things we saw in East Africa happening is that between Rwanda and Tanzania, for instance, they have, a regulated border that's open 24 hours, and it's, you can monitor. So there's not much of informal trade happening. So the whole perception of what is border and rent-seeking against border changes. So I think that's and I think Tripura is a great example. And because for Nepal also, till about 96, one of our parts of Nepal itself was landlocked. I mean, to go to that part of far west Nepal, we had to go via India. So it was only after the Karnali Bridge that we have got connectivity. So it's also the intra-land, the landlocked within the landlocked countries, it poses a bigger issue. So with that, I think I would like to move to Pierre, as to continue the discussion of, the landlockedness. Yesterday we were discussing about parts of France being, having been landlocked itself. And then you build the roads and then people start coming to the capital. Everybody moves to Paris, And so how there's this whole social issues around landlocked countries being connected and the perils of being landlocked. So maybe we can just have some thoughts from you on this.
Okay, let me try to address that a little bit later. Before that, I would like to make two comments. One is that listening to this discussion, I was really wondering whether we should discuss landlockedness. Is it what really matters? I was thinking in my mind that a small island in the middle of the Pacific is not landlocked. It has access to the sea, and yet it has a lot of problems. It is sea-locked. What I mean by that is that what matters in the end is markets, size of markets and access to markets. Of course, if you have landlocked, access to market, and if you are small, access to markets depend on another of factors that involve your neighbors. But this same question can arise in many cases. You have countries which are not landlocked, but they are trade-locked in a quite similar way, because they have a strongly protectionist trade policy, they have strongly foreign hostile regulations, and that creates a result that resembles a lot. The results that, without doing anything, a landlocked country would achieve. So I think that in thinking about landlockedness, we should immediately shift to thinking about access to markets. Which markets and how the access can be organized and for what products and services. And in that sense, the quality of being landlocked doesn't disappear, but becomes one of the dimensions to guide the thinking instead of being seen as an insurmountable problem. So I think it's an important focus to have. The second comment is about determinism, since we started to, and destiny, since we started to talk about that. I think probably everyone would agree that there is no ex-ante determinism, that the future is what we make out of it, and so on. However, when you look at debates around all of us, when you look at what people expect from researchers, it is always systematically to predict the future. As if, and when they fail, they receive a letter from the Queen of any country asking them why they failed. As if it was natural to think of academics and researchers that they have instruments to predict the future. No, Madame Soleil might have instruments to predict the future, yes, but no researchers or academics, they are not there for that. It's not their social role. So in a way, everyone would understand that the world is not deterministic, but everyone behaves or perceives as if it were. And the answer is no, it isn't. And for landlocked countries, the future is not written. A lot of things can happen, and a lot of good things can happen, and there are examples. The difference between the rich landlocked country and the poor landlocked countries is access to markets, which was favored in the first case by a number of historical, institutional, political, geographical conditions. Yes, these landlocked countries are in Europe. But it doesn't mean that the similar trajectory is closed for other countries. So no determinism, please, but that leads me to insist on the fact that we should change the view about the role of thinking. The role of thinking is not to predict the future, but too often in our world, we are quantitativists. We want to highlight what will happen in the short term, in the medium term, and long term, and we value people by their capacity to predict. No, that's a judgment. It's not science. And that's something that can be an impediment to thinking about potential solutions. Now, on your question, yes, I remember having mentioned that in our earlier discussion, that indeed when you take a landlocked place or city or region in an existing country like France, but it applies to any country, and if you de-landlock that region, then what may happen is that economies of scale will play and the city will attract everyone. So if you create a fast train between a landlocked region and the capital, what may happen is that once the train is in place, the landlocked region will become empty because everyone will want to go to the capital. It's so easy now. So that's something that requires indeed counteracting measures which are difficult. In France, we have a word for that, c'est la politique d'aménagement du territoire. And indeed, on a regional and international basis, we may very well have similar concerns in the future. Right now, I wouldn't be too worried because the very fact that there are nations is a barrier for that to happen. There will be some labor mobility, and that may be actually a good thing, but it will never be to the same extent as within the same nation for a lot of reasons that the national identity it creates barriers that prevent that from happening too fast.
Thank you, Pierre. I think there's a sort of there's an agreement on the perception issue, the perception of landlocked, not being a real impediment to growth. I mean, it's also the perception of being landlocked being an impediment in our thinking process. And yesterday somebody had brought in the issue of mind-locked, and perhaps I think Valérie was mentioning mind-locked, and so I mean, not having been worked in landlocked countries, and you've also seen the challenges of being sea-locked. So maybe some perspectives on how do you see that, and do you also subscribe to the same view on the perception of landlocked versus development, and the challenges of also other developing nations that are could be not a landlocked country but have the same challenges that a landlocked country may have.
Yeah, I would say I think it goes for development the same way that it goes in life. What we can't change, we have to accept it. And there is this say that says that if you don't have what you love, you'd better love what you have. So in that sense, I would say that that should apply to the landlocked country. And somewhat we have talked about policy lock, mind lock, whatever. So we know that the lock thing is actually not the problem. And so it also means that actually, and you had initially, when we prepared for that, asked me to think about how to unleash the potential of a landlocked country, and Nepal in particular, although you wrote a book on that and you're more qualified than me to talk about this. But thinking of it, what I realize is that I think that what I will say applies somewhat to any country. So as a matter of fact, once again, the issue of landlockedness is not the right issue. It's merely a pretext, maybe. And what we've seen is that sometimes landlocked countries may say, oh, we have an additional right because we are landlocked. Yes, as well. We can say that's why we have UN conventions and the conventions on the law of the sea and so on and so forth that allow to kind of compensate different problems. But at the end, we are all the same. So in addition to what has been said, I think that in the case of Nepal, you don't have the sea, but for God's sake, you have the highest mountain in the world. So I would say you can capitalize first and foremost on your assets. And the assets of Nepal are actually a huge potential for development. First, with this highest mountain in the world, with the Everest and all the Himalayas. All what you can do. Of course, tourism is one thing, but not only. So there are many things. I mean, you have what the whole world dreams of having. Because the highest mountain, it's so wow, so cool, would my son say. So cool to have the highest mountain in the world. But you also have such a diversity in your culture and so on and so forth, that this as well can make you develop some product, that would be unique. And if these products are unique, they can actually compete easily because the cost is not so much the issue. If you are the only one selling certain things, it may take longer for these things to go out. It might be a little bit more costly because there is all this transaction cost and transport. But since you are the only one, so capitalize on your uniqueness. And with your uniqueness, you can really unleash the potential of Nepal. Secondly, I would say, and the second one is really the same for all countries, but there is that twist for the landlocked countries, is capitalize on your people. We've talked about IT, the connectivity and so on and so forth. But you can have the best connectivity in the world. If your people aren't educated, then what do? So therefore, education and capitalizing on your people, educating your people, is your best assets. Because we know, and it was mentioned by some speakers before me, the issue of services. If you can't export many goods, you can do a lot of services through connectivities, but you need to have an educated population. So therefore, capitalizing on your people is also the best way to unleash your potential. In the case of landlocked country, I would say, capitalize on your UN partners and on your partners, in the sense that you were talking about diplomacy. UN is also here for that. I was talking about the conventions that helps in. So whenever there is an issue, we have all that sets of conventions and treaties and modalities. So capitalize on that. We are your partners in all these aspects. That's the third advice. And the fourth advice, I want to come back on that one, because it's also what the UN stands for, because it's peace and good relation and so on and so forth. Capitalize on your neighbors. And actually, your neighbors are your first market. So in thinking in developing products as well, think about the products that are really needed for your neighbors. Because since they are there, at the reach of you so easily. And on top of it, here in the case of Nepal, you have big neighbors. So if you find a niche in their market, it's really a golden mine for you. So also unleash that, capitalize on your neighbors. So I would say all these for me are really the main advice that I could give. And yesterday when we were preparing this, actually at the end of our dinner preparing this, we were saying, so finally we say landlocked is not a curse. There are many ways of being locked than just by the land. So we ended up saying landlocked and so what? So maybe that would be my finishing.
Okay, thank you. Landlocked and so what? Okay, so this has been a great round of discussion. So I think looking at the watch, we will open the floor for questions, and I know there will be a lot of hands coming up. So basic rules, please introduce yourself. The panelist is great, so you don't have to emphasize the panel is great and you are great and thank you. Please don't do that. Be very direct, okay? And please ask directly the questions. Please don't take more than a minute. We would like to take a round of 5 or 6 questions, and we'll make a round of the panelists. Okay, so here we come from 1, 2, 3. Yes, so the gentleman there. Yes, so.
Interesting panelists. I take your word, landlocked. Dr. Waglé's policy luck, serving the neighbor from the UNDP, and challenges, the similar complexities. My name is Vishnu, and I will come to you last. Basu. My name is Vishnu. I'm former ambassador to Japan and also the member of the Foreign Policy Draft Committee in the Parliament, Nepal Parliament 2013, involved in development, regional development research since 2 decades. Really, I appreciate, I'll start from Dr. Waglé. Very practical, because the conceptual...
Sir, what is your question or your comment?
Question.
Okay. I know that's great.
Just
okay.
question.
Sorry.
Question. Yeah, was that policy luck matter that we couldn't spend the budget on the Russian, the construction, because this is a relevant question to you. It's the chronic disease of the land countries. Madam Basu, connectivity, for example, land-linked. We have BBIN, you are focusing, and I'm also focusing the SHINEC, China, India, Nepal Economic Corridor. This CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, they're getting $46 billion. Now Bangladesh is also getting $24 billion. And Sri Lanka, Madam Ambassador is there, there are 5 to $8 billion. But because you are involved in the research, this is a typical question. Why India is hesitating this? Because China has declared that this will be the largest, actually, gateway via Nepal to the, sharp economic corridor. Number one. Sir,
Sir, I think I'll have to stop you there.
Okay, I'll stop. Okay, these two questions, two panelists.
Okay,
I have challenges also, but I will talk to
so
you.
there will be some time for the
Thank you very much.
coffee.
Thank you.
So, lady here, and then I'll come to you, sir.
Hello, my name is Eloise Jha. I'm country director of Planète Enfant, French NGO working in Nepal. I had a question actually about so we are speaking about Nepal being landlocked and this actually not being such an issue. So either, instead of really speaking about being landlocked, can we actually, what do you think of shifting the thinking of Nepal as a buffer state between China and India, rather than a landlocked country, and this being a bigger challenge than actually being landlocked? Prithvi Narayan Shah himself spoke about Nepal as the yam between two stones. And I find it extremely interesting that in the past, Nepal was indeed a buffer state, meaning that it was in between two states that were potentially in conflict. Especially the Indian-Sino War in '62. And I was wondering, since the relation between India and China is much better now, what is the role of this state that was a buffer state between India and China?
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Excellency, for a wonderful event to organizing this evening. My direct, as Sujib said, I have to be direct. It would be great pleasure if even we get somebody from our north neighbor to speak about One Belt, One Road issues. That is also part of our connectivity. Because we've been hearing this BBIN concept last 2 years, but in practice, we haven't done anything or we haven't able to connect anything. Regarding to our product, to India particularly, like there is a tariff and non-tariff products we have been, exporting to India directly. Most of the non-tariff items or products has been come out from the border all the time. All the time the issue is quality. It has to be addressed, to connect these issues. This is my all concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Please introduce yourself, sir.
Sorry, I'm Bijan Pant. I was the former advisor to the Prime Minister in development sector, Mr. Sushil Koira, and recently I'm working for Oxford University for South Asia. Thank you.
Let me take a question at the back and I'll come this side. So there's a gentleman at the back.
Hello, my name is Yashu. I recently graduated from Sciences Po Paris. And one question I had for the panelists was, I think we left out a very important equation in this debate about being landlocked and having access to the sea. It may or may not affect, I don't know, but I just wanted to pose this question is, how would in modern context, the idea of the problem of climate change, how could it may or may not change the whole equation? That was my question.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a gentleman there.
Yeah. I'm Prince in Basnet, ex-Brigadier General, ex-Peacekeeper, and formerly presently teaching at the university. My question goes to Indian scholars. I would like to ask you why you want to ignore SARC. Why don't you like to strengthen the SARC again? Please do not fragment this region again. Why BBIN? Is it for the counter of OBY policy? And I do see this is not economic mobilization, it's a military mobilization to make as a buffer zone in between China and India. So, please. And we believe on non-aligned movement. And for us, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, all are same. Why BBIN again? So that, please, make a strong SARC. Why? And look at your country, sir. And look at your country as well. You get more poor people in India.
Okay, thank you, sir. I think you got your point across.
Yourself, and please do not get in hard time in. We landlocked people.
Thank you, sir. Point taken. Thank you. Yeah, we had, okay, one more. I saw.
My name is Krishna Gewali. I was with the government until 3 years ago. I have a very short and simple question. You talked about, I think it was Swarnim or some other panelist also, you talked about being policy locked. So my question is policy separate from politics? So can you also say that we are politics locked as well?
Okay, I think this is quite a good mix of stuff, and I think we'll have couple of panels, the couple of minutes for each panelist to take this question. And I didn't know, Anasua, you're going to be the next ambassador to Nepal because there's a specific question being directed at you.
Good luck.
You can start here. We can start from there.
I think the first question was on underspending, capital budget, or the government's budget. Is it also an indication of being policy locked? Perhaps it is. There are policy incentives that really distort the behavior on the part of certain decision makers. Now, I think it deserves a different, distinct session. Maybe it's a topic for Sujiv's next economic forum. But there are also genuine questions about bureaucratic competencies. And intentions, where I've written about this elsewhere, so I don't want to go there. But yes, a part of it is there. Landlocked or buffer state. I mean, now in the case of Laos, I think they want to call themselves not landlocked but land linked. So buffer state, invites this connotation about being this helpless country trapped between the big powers, with a lost agency and sort of even a degree of sovereignty. So I don't like that term, but given the rise of Asia, China, India, and I've made this point frequently that from Katmandou you can reach half the world within 6 hours of flying distance. So here, so if you went by the 20th century model or paradigm of production and exchange, yes, landlockedness hurt you because the rich, prosperous markets were really far away. That's no longer the case. So converting landlockedness into land linkedness and our leveraging of the rise of India, China, and other Southeast Asian countries is actually an advantage for us. So land linkedness is really where we ought to go. And here, I think to link us, One Belt, One Road would indeed be a very welcome initiative, and how we really leverage on that is a big policy priority, as is the Indian initiative of Bharatmala and lots of connectivity initiatives that the government of India has taken. So here we just have to keep an open mind and really, with the climate change, does it complicate matters? Well, I guess if sea levels rise and cities like London and New York will be underwater in decades to come. Maybe they would want to buy some real estate in the Nepalese hills and mountains, beginning now. So it may help us, actually. And Krishna Gewali's point on whether policy is linked to politics. Yes, I think you can't detach policy making from the larger the sort of political economic structures of the country. Again, Paul Collier's book is pretty good, actually. He talks about 4 traps for countries like us, in the bottom billion. So one is natural resource curse. We're not there yet, but with the big windfalls coming from hydro, it's a big question of economic management and how we really, sequester that wealth and make use of it in strategic ways later on. But that's no longer, and that's not yet a concern as it was for many sub-Saharan African countries. But conflict has become relevant for us. Bad governance is another trap, and of course, being landlocked with bad neighbors. So I think 3 of the 4 traps are really relevant for us, and yeah, I agree with you that policy is a byproduct of the political incentive structures that we have.
Yeah, thank you so much for interventions and for questions. I'll start with the question of a non-tariff barrier. You have correctly pointed out, the problem in relation to non-recognition of of certificates, or non-issuing or non-acceptance of certificates. It's a major problem. We have got that kind of, responses in the border, but it's true that Nepal is not alone facing this situation, because this is a situation prevalent between Bhutan and India as well. And when I was in Phuentsholing, all trucks associations, they actually shared their experiences that there is a confusion between, or the misunderstanding between BAFRA and the BSB, Border Bhutan Standard Bureau. And actually the understanding is between, the prevalent understanding is between India with BSB and not BAFRA, and the BAFRA is operating in the bordering area. So there is a kind of misunderstanding between BAFRA and BSB for Bhutan. And you are correctly pointed out the question of certification so far as non-tariff barrier is concerned. And I can tell you that some of the officials, those who are working in Kolkata on BBIN, they are also, because in ORF, Observer Research Foundations, my institution is multidisciplinary public policy think tank. And we organize this kind of, meetings as well for our own research, which will have a kind of policy implications. And this issue has been, dealt with in some of our meetings. And second question is, I'll be very much intrigued to, to take up the issue of SARC, because I have, in my PhD dissertation, I have worked on SARC, and which has been published as a book eventually. I must say that SARC is a grand design. And if we have this kind of small negotiations, small steps, yes, in a way, it will be slightly detrimental to have this kind of grand design, but legally, it is not, not going against the spirit of SARC, because if you go by the charter of SARC, I think in Article 8, it has specified, in fact, it has allowed the member states, more than 2 states, can sit together and can have this kind of cross-border negotiations. So, keeping this fact in mind, it is not at all, going against SARC. Only the approaching way is different. It is incremental in its nature to have a kind of grand design. And in the European situation, we have experienced this kind of small initiatives to have grand cooperation. And the theory that we often used is neo-functionalism, which will have a kind of, if you want to have a kind of economic cooperation on the cooperation in the cultural field, then it will have a kind of spillover effect on your political agenda. So I think it's not detrimental to the entire concept of,
Okay, thank you. I think before we take 3 more questions and come back for the final round, I think I just want Pierre and Valérie to just shed your own thoughts on what Krishna Gandhi raised on being policy locked, being linked to politics, and so just a quick take before we go on, and you'll get another opportunity for final remarks on some of the other issues.
Okay, a few remarks. I personally don't like too much the notion of a buffer state, because I think it's too restrictive. There's one good aspect about it, which is it introduces the fact that you have more than one transit country, and it's interesting to think about various alternatives for market access. But I think that the relevant market may very well be something else, especially in the 21st century, with a change in methods of production, with a change in the nature of products, with the move toward IT and so on. So I would invite a country like Nepal to think about the world, not only to have only I don't mean that the neighbors don't count, not at all, but I think it shouldn't be restricted to that. I agree very much with the notion of politics locked, but here again I would argue that politics is not predetermined. It responds to incentives. So the big question is a question of management. How can we engineer the change of incentives that will finally align politics with desirable policies? And unless we do that, we are in the recommendation about what to do, which are never implemented. So I think that's a major aspect of the discussion here, to understand that almost everything goes back to politics, but politics is not predetermined. It can move, it can change, it can modernize. And let me end with climate change. Because there are two aspects of climate change that are very relevant to that discussion. The first one is that it will affect infrastructures. It will affect the quality of infrastructures. It might increase the frequency of natural catastrophes. We have to face that. That's a major aspect of climate change. And it should be an incentive actually to fight climate change as much as can be done. And I think that our countries don't do enough. There is one interesting aspect about it, which is again the incentive. If, and it's a big if, major actors, major countries recognize that is a collective good problem, that is a common action problem, then that changes the politics. That immediately that creates a very powerful incentive toward cooperation. I don't know whether I should be optimistic or not, but certainly the presence of high-level issues of common interest at a global level can help change politics. And that will benefit a number of sub-political relations between countries and their neighbors, because it can create then a deep feeling of common interest, at least on some very important issues. So I'll stop there, because I think it's neither or white, but there is a potential there as well.
Thank you. I think, I know there are a lot of hands up there, but we have to be mindful of the time also. So I think, unfortunately, we'll have to continue the discussions around tea time. So I think what I'll do is I'll get Valérie to answer the questions and also any final remarks you have, and we'll do one round, and I would ask the ambassador to make his final remarks.
Well, I want to comment just on the climate change, the impact, the fact of being landlocked. Does it have an impact? And I would say, I think that in that case, it's safer for a landlocked country in relation to climate change, because we see that the small island states are much more impacted by climate change with the water sea level that is rising and so on and so forth. And as well, when it comes to, when there is a disaster and humanitarian assistance has to be delivered, actually to be a small island state means that you are in a much more difficult position than landlocked countries that have all around neighbors from where assistance can come. So the vulnerability of Nepal, in the case of Nepal, Nepal is highly vulnerable to the impact of climate change, but it doesn't come from the fact that it is landlocked. It comes from many other factors, social, economical, geographical. And it is actually vulnerable to disasters that have nothing to see with climate change as well, like earthquake, for instance. So I would say in that case, I don't think that there is really, with the landlockedness, an issue with climate change. But, as I say, specific vulnerabilities of Nepal, indeed, make Nepal much more, I would say, in need of a global approach. And on this, I would like to say that, for instance, if we think about pollution, you know, in itself, Nepal is well polluted. It doesn't need its neighbors. But it so happened that it also has neighbors that are highly polluted. So it means that it's a combination of things that make the situation very difficult for Nepal. And my last point on that, and I'm very much aware, and it will be my final remark, is that for the issue of climate change, as for many of the issues we've discussed, there is the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals. I mean, this is what the world adopted. And the Sustainable Development Goals actually look at all these issues of the people, the economy, and environment with the logic of leaving no one behind, and of the logic that prosperity should be for everybody. And I think that if Nepal really implements all the SDGs, as it is very willing to do. Actually, Nepal is one of the leading countries when it comes to implementing the SDGs. They have taken already some important steps and so on and so forth. But if Nepal and all the countries in the world really take the agenda of the SDGs as a roadmap, because this is what it is, I think that a number of the issues that we've addressed actually can be overcome and solved. So I would say, once again, capitalize on your partners like the United Nations, and then you would have, I would say, a good framework. No, I'm kidding, but I would say that's important. That framework is very important, and I think it addresses the issue of inequality as well. because inequality is among people and inequality is among countries. So the logic of having this framework is make sure that these inequalities are addressed.
Thank you. Thank you. Pierre, your final remarks? I know, I wish this could go on.
I think the final remarks really go back to what we discussed at length, which is that there is no determinism about being landlocked, that there are strategies to adopt. Now, that leads me to my own minute of ads, which is the fact that these strategies should be designed by the country itself. Of course, in that design process, the country can benefit and use foreign advice, can import knowledge from outside. But these issues should be researched and debated within the landlocked country and within Nepal, which means that, again, we are back to education and higher education and research. Research shouldn't be done only in the best world universities who assemble to discuss the state of landlockedness. It is an issue that deserves the best researchers locally, and for that they need to have resources and they need to be trained, and they can find in the Global Development Network a forum in which we can try to help them do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Anasua.
This commercial was offered by GDN.
Yeah, to conclude, I think I would like to flag again the issue that one of the major objectives of BBIN is to transform landlocked areas into land-linked. If it is so, then it is also important to understand how to develop the peripheral areas across border, and keeping our symbiotic, extensive ethnic, cultural relationship with our neighbors. I think this is high time to place our strategies accordingly, of course, keeping our national interests in mind. Thank you.
Yes, Swarnim. Yeah, final words.
Are we closing with this?
Yeah, closing with this. I'll just have the ambassador speak something before the final thank you remarks. Yeah.
So it's the conclusion, I guess, is it's not landlockedness, it's really remoteness, right? So it could, the kind of constraints that we talked about for Nepal really apply to Vanuatu and Fiji and Samoa and Tuvalu. So I go back to Adam Smith again. So land carriage is definitely more expensive than water carriage. That's what he wrote, exact words. And industries will flourish near the coastal areas then. And this is really remarkable that this observation was made almost 50 years before the Industrial Revolution took off. You know, if you pin 1820 as that point when Industrial Revolution and modern economic growth became a sustained phenomenon, he was writing in the 1770s and really making this sharp observation. And we see the results today. You look at India, Jharkhand and the interior of Madhya Pradesh is really behind the southern states, Tamil Nadu and Kerala and Karnataka, right? You look at China, Eastern China, 10 times more prosperous than Western China. And you look at the United States, per capita income in Kansas and per capita income in Arkansas is half that of per capita income in Connecticut and Maryland. So this is evident, 200 years but the basic point I want to reinforce today is really this need not be the case in the 21st century, right? The modes of production and modes of exchange have not just shifted, they have transformed. And so countries like us now are well positioned to really take advantage of these shifts, to convert our traditional handicap, what was handicap in the 19th and the 20th century, to actually a great strategic leverage for our long-term and medium-term prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you, Swarnim. Before I make my few remarks and I'll ask Veronique to come and close, maybe if Ambassador you have, because you've been part of this debate and I have just a couple of minutes for you to say a few words.
Thank you very much. I think a couple of minutes is much too much. I mostly want to thank all of you for this very interesting debate. Where I learned a lot, and I learned that landlockedness is an illusion. So this is my final words, and I would like very much Véronique Beccia, the director of Alliance Française de Katmandou, who has been the pillar of the organization, to say the final words about what's coming next.
So before Valérie takes on, let me just summarize some of the discussions. And so I think the way I began with looking at landlockedness from my own experiences of working and looking at from the Himalayan side. And so there was a issue on climate change. So those who are interested, there's a Himalayan Consensus Summit that is going to take place on 24th, 25th here, and we'll figure out how you can attend. And that would be discussing the climate change impact on landlocked and the Himalayan region, and landlockedness around that is a big issue around that. So I think just want to make that comment. And I think it's also, landlocked, Swarnim really summarized it well, and this should not be an excuse to getting it right. And we are in 21st century, and I think we can just try to think within a new way in terms of looking at landlocked versus landlinked, and to really push the discourses in a different way, and not to rent seek against that. And I think one of the things, Anasua, you continuously came back to, in the sense that how do people around the borders perceive, because linkages around the borders versus linkages around where policy formulation takes place, it's completely different. And if that we can change, and hopefully BBIN is an initiative I also have a bit of faith on. We've been sort of looking at them now, the implementation of the motor vehicles agreement. Hopefully some things will move. I think even countries like Bhutan really feel this is required. A lot of work is happening, and hopefully one or two things can be cracked. And if one or two things can be cracked, I think the entrepreneur is always 5 steps ahead of the policymaker. They will figure out something, and will figure out that this is a great opportunity. And I think that entrepreneurship and thinking of the new paradigm may help to change this. Thank you very much, the panelists, and it's been a great honor and a privilege once again to be part of the panel and this discussion. And I'll request Valérie to do the honors of closing.
Thank you. Thank you to the panelists, yourself, Sujeev, as well, the Nepal Economic Forum team, who's helped us a lot to put this event together. Thank you, all of you, for coming. I hope you've enjoyed this evening. If you did, I'd like to inform you that Alliance Française de Katmandou will be organizing a similar event again later on this year on a different theme. But if you've liked the idea, if you've liked the concept, please keep an eye on our website, on our cultural brochure you've got on your seat as well. And I now invite you to grab a hot drink, some cookies, and continue the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Very good. Too much like women.